Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villeray.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES television.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, an election victory came early for one candidate as a new Louisiana insurance commissioner was proclaimed once his lone opponent dropped out. On the rest of the ballot, however, there are still many candidates jockeying for a slateful of offices as political signs sprout from neutral grounds. Elsewhere, the New Orleans Police Department is jockeying for job candidates as recruiting efforts intensify. We will look at these stories as well as an unusual French Quarter crime where the weapons were something other than guns. Our Future Watch segment tracks the jump in COVID cases and the outlook for more vaccines, and we will recall the life of Jason Cantrell, the husband of Mayor LaToya Cantrell. Also, Audubon Zoo supporters may all axe for CEO Ron Forman, but he's announced his retirement. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Missy Wilkinson, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Will Sutton, columnist, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. All right, Missy, we're going to go on over to you because for once it seems like recruitment for NOPD is heading in the direction that we wanted to go into.
Yes, that is great. It's nice to see the free fall kind of stop, if not start shooting back up, at least not continue to plummet. We're at a number where we're hovering around 900 officers, commissioned officers right now, a little bit below, which is the bad news is, that's lower than it's been since the 1940s. The good news is the recruit class that is within OPD right now is around 60-something strong. It's more than twice as big as what they got all of last year, and they're really motivated. They seem like I had the opportunity to sit in with a class, and they know the challenge and they want to rise to it, and they're there, a lot of them, because they want to feel that sense of purpose. So whether we'll get at the goal that Chief Woodfork stated on Wednesday that she's aiming for, which is 1,200 commissioned officers in 2 years, remains to be seen. Yeah. A lot of analysts think it's pretty unlikely that we'll be able to add that many officers in that period, but we have sort of staunched the crisis a little bit, at least looks like.
Yeah. So more in the recruit class, but you gain some and you lose some, because while we have new ones coming on, there are those retiring or just leaving.
Right, and that's why it's actually, we need to get more than 300 cops to get to 1,200, because we lose 80 to 100 each year due to resignations, due to retiring. So we actually will need to hire like 500 to get to that goal, counting the attrition.
And recruitment has been hard in these past couple of years for various reasons. People are just not responding to the call. So the interim chief, was actually at a recruitment effort at the Southern Baptist Seminary, I think, this week.
Yes, in Denali, yes.
And so what is NOPD doing and stepping up, how to getting more of these people in?
Well, they're getting rid of a lot of the barriers that had existed. They brought this on-site testing so that people could show up, take the test right then and there, get information about the job. You can test remotely now. You don't have to come to New Orleans to do it. You can transfer from other agencies. So they're just, helping to unbottleneck some of the things that had maybe slowed down the flow of new officers. But you're right, it's a nationwide crisis, and people are just not really policing the same way. And it could just be that policing looks different now, because the good news of this also is that we have 300 civilian positions that are filled on the new NOPD civilian support, the investigative specialist roles, those are filled. So those people do act as force multipliers. it could just be that we're going through a sea change in how policing looks in New Orleans and beyond.
And so is NOPD now heading this, or are they still working with the Police and Justice Foundation?
So the New Orleans Police are in the process of renewing and extending their contract with the New Orleans Police and Justice Foundation. It's going to be a stepped down commitment. And it's going to be a 3 to 6 month shorter contract. The department is basically going to take over its own recruiting, which the Police and Justice Foundation had really helped a lot with in the past. They want to do that just to have kind of more agency over it, and because it was never intended to be a long-term involvement. It was kind of a stopgap measure at the time that they entered this agreement, and it's gone on for 10 years now. So.
You know, it's interesting. It's only a couple of years ago when there was the defund the police movement nationwide. The public never bought it in terms of the polls, but I always wondered about people who are getting at the age they're looking for a job, if they're thinking about being a policeman, and they're hearing all that outcry, defund the policeman. But obviously it didn't affect them. That they're coming.
They are coming. And I talked to our former superintendent, Ronald Surpass, about that, and he doesn't think that this alleged smear campaign against police really had that big of an effect, and that people still want to be police officers, and it's especially if you want to serve your community and have like a solid paying job, it's a pretty good option.
Who are the majority of the recruits? Is it young people first jobs, or is it second career people, or is it across the board?
So the current breakdown of the current recruit class is the majority of them are in their 20s and 30s, and then there's a few in their 40s, and I think maybe one in their 50s. As far as where they're coming from, I'm not really sure, but the ages would suggest that it is a lot of people who are just entering this career.
And are we seeing some transfer from other departments over to NOPD? Because we've sort of been seeing the opposite for a while, where folks from NOPD were going to area departments.
That number I don't have, but what I do know is that the department has successfully lured back 9 people who had handed in resignations. So that effort has borne some fruit.
And what about the salary comparison in our metro area? How does NOPD pay?
I mean, it's a pretty good salary. It's $42,000 for a recruit, and then when you are a commissioned officer, it goes up to, I forget where in the 50s. I honestly don't remember the exact number in the 50s, but I think 59,000. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's.
So in this recruitment class, 60. Yeah, that's a good number.
Yeah, I think it started out at 67. I think it's maybe if you have dropped off since. Oh, I'm sorry, 30. 30 in the recruit class, okay. 67 for the year so far.
For the year, okay.
Yes.
All right, well, that is a good gain. All right,
it is.
Thanks a lot, Missy.
Thank you.
E, over to you. Elections, we're in that time right now, and we did see a big move this week.
Well, this just in from the Channel 12 Election Central that we've projected a winner, okay? In the insurance commissioner's race, Tim Temple, all right? Now, other media may have projected him a couple of days ago, but we have the real insight. And the decisive thing was when his one opponent dropped out, all right? And so he's declared the winner. But he's someone who's going to win anyway. I mean, anybody watching this election can see he's been a guy that's been around. He's been around Baton Rouge. He's been in the insurance business. His family he has good credentials, and so you could see. I mean, this guy is going to win this election, and so that's decided. It ends Jim Donovan's long-term run. He was, like, I think, in his 5th term. You got to give Jim Donovan credit. He stabilized the office. There was so much turnover, including 3 of them going to jail over a period of time. He really stabilized it. He and Temple have some different ideas on things. It's not rank or anything, but he's going to bring a new perspective to it. The other race we want to look at, last week we looked at the governor's race, is the lieutenant governor's race. And the defining moment in this race was when Billy Nungesser, who's the incumbent, decided that everybody thought he was going to run for governor, and when he decided not to, then a lot of people, I think, just decided not to run. And so you get a name, and if you don't recognize many of these names, I agree with you. Okay, this is not a big name field. So you see Billy Nungesser running for re-election. Elbert Gilroy, if you're from Opelousas, used to be a state senator. An interesting person. By his own admission, his dad used to be a bootlegger, and his mother was a very avowed Baptist who was against drinking. Okay, he himself, during the course of his career in the Senate, was at different times a Republican and a Democrat, and so he's an interesting character. I call him a long shot, but probably the kind of person who'd finish second. There's another guy on there named Raspani, who is the brother of the Raspani who ran for governor last year. And he's kind of known for among the wildlife people for doing videos and things. And so he's there, but I don't see anybody really major in that election. So it looks like a pretty good race for Billy Nungesser.
Yeah, and as you have said, you have declared the lieutenant governor position probably to be the best one in the state.
That's the best job in all of politics, okay, to be a lieutenant governor. I mean, and it's easy, it's fun, and all that. But you know, it really had an effect on the Jefferson Parish election too, because when they thought that Nungesser was going to run for governor, Jennifer Van Vranken was planning to run, and she would have been a contender in this. When she didn't, she ran for councilman at large, and so that did really juggle the council campaigns.
Right. So Tim Temple, now our new insurance commissioner, certainly at this point insurance commissioner-elect, I guess, he has one heck of a job in front of him, considering the insurance crisis that we're facing right now.
It's a mess because there's so many firms that want to close down, both in the residential and the business side. Yeah, it's going to be a tough job.
Really is. We wish him all the best of luck because we all need it. All right, Ed, thanks a lot. All right, Will, let's go on over to you. You wanted to have a few words about the mayor's husband who died this week, Jason Cantrell, who, by all accounts, you hear people who knew him describe him as a really kind, nice man.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those cases where, you know, he may not be as prominent as an elected official, but in certain segments of New Orleans life and culture, a lot of people knew Jason. Very well liked, affable guy, good attorney, very involved in the community, and you know, a good friend, and you know, somebody who came out to events, and not with the mayor, not when the mayor was the mayor, but on his own. You know, I mean, you even have people who are not necessarily political friends of the mayor who really liked Jason. And I think that speaks a lot to the character and the type of person he was. Such a loss to lose somebody at 55 years old. The city lowered the flag, and there's a distinction because some people here lowering the flag, they think the U.S. flag, the mayor can't lower the U.S. flag or the state flag, only the city flag. So there are services on Tuesday, and there's a visitation or a lion in state on Monday.
At Gallier Hall?
At Gallier Hall.
You know, the mayor's father-in-law is Harry Cantrell, who's a magistrate, and you know, politically connected, and of course she married into the Cantrell family, so a lot of people thought that was a real boost in terms of her own political career. But the day that he died, or the day after the announcements that came out, addressed that point and said, even though the Cantrells were connected, that the mayor made it in politics on her own, and they wanted to kind of you know, establish that point.
Yeah.
Even though anybody makes in politics, there's a lot of people that help you, and so I mean.
Well, you have to have a lot of people
Yeah,
help
yeah.
you to get in and stay in, but
including in family names, and
right,
so there's no shame
absolutely.
there, you know. So
yeah.
So his dad was the elected magistrate, but Jason never ran for political office,
No,
did he? But he was a
did not.
practicing attorney.
Practicing attorney, very involved in community activities. Not the kind of guy that you would see like on the news because of helping with this event or that activity, but he was out there, and a lot of people knew him as a result of that.
Of course, they are the parents of a daughter,
Yes.
a young daughter, and our hearts really, really go out to the entire family, but particularly to the daughter. I mean, for a daughter to lose her dad at such a young age, that is really very hard. It's
hard for any of us to lose a parent, but I can't imagine being a kid and losing a parent, and particularly in a case like this where it's such a public family.
Yeah.
To have a loss like this. I can't think of any other folks where an incumbent elected official has lost a spouse, with the exception there was a mayor in Shreveport in the 70s, can't remember his name, but you know, he lost his wife, but that doesn't happen very often, that somebody elected loses a spouse.
well, actually, I looked. The mayor of New Orleans in the '70s, Dallas Morrison, his wife Corrine died.
Oh, okay.
During time. That was the only example I could find of, at least certainly in modern times. You know?
So services will be held at Gallier Hall?
The Lion and State visitation on Monday, and then the church services on Tuesday.
All righty, thanks, Will. Our condolences to the entire Cantrell family, certainly. All right, Don, let's go on over to you because we have a visitor again resurfacing, and that would be COVID, uptick in a new variant.
That we do. According to CDC statistics, hospitalizations in the last week of reporting were up 14.3%. Deaths were up 10%. There are higher levels in the wastewater and higher levels of percent positive testing. However, the numbers may be well off because we're not testing nearly to the levels we were during prior surges. Local doctor Fred Lopez with LSU Health Sciences Center quotes it as a little surge. We are waiting anxiously for the new booster, which is supposed to be coming out at the end of September. That booster will specifically target the XBV strain, which is the new Omicron subvariant. Dr. Lopez told me it should also counteract Eris, which is the EG5, also an Omicron subvariant that is making the rounds now. I think Will might have some news to share on those subvariants making the rounds.
Unfortunately, I got hit by one of those. I traveled to Birmingham for the National Association of Black Journalists Convention. Last year was in Las Vegas, and I thought it was more likely that I would catch it there because massive convention city and flying in airports and being stuck at the gate. I managed to miss it that time. However, I did catch it in 2022, and that was a tough stretch. Thanks to Paxlovid, in my case, that was helpful. So I learned from that lesson and kind of knew what to do, but confirmed things with my doctor to make sure. So I've come out of 5 days of quarantine, but fully vaccinated, fully boosted. It's just an indication that even if you do everything right, it doesn't mean it's 100%, and it can still get you.
And you always did everything right, too, because you really did make sure that you kept yourself inside and avoided crowds, et cetera. Well,
we couldn't get you on this show.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. That second go round, was it more difficult or less?
It was easier to deal with because I kind of knew what to expect. I had a temperature of over 102, which is very high.
Yeah.
And lots of chills. And it was a tough first couple of days, but it settled down by day 3.
Well, we're glad to see you here and feeling
I'm
good.
happy.
So Dr. Lopez did point out that the vaccines aren't designed to prevent you from becoming ill. They're designed to prevent hospitalizations and deaths.
And that's the key. That's so key.
There is a whole lot of vaccine fatigue going on in America right now. That the booster has been out. Other boosters have been out there. About 20% of the eligible people have actually chosen to partake in getting boosters. This new booster that's supposed to be out the end of September is supposed to be better at fighting illness. But when we speak of vaccine fatigue, there's also a new vaccine coming out that everyone over 60 is encouraged to meet with their doctors and then probably get, and that's to prevent RSV. So if you're over 60 and you're watching the program, you're supposed to RSV vaccinate, COVID vaccinate, and flu vaccinate. So if you're one who's not likely to want to participate in all that, it's a little difficult.
So let me ask you about the COVID the new one, the new vaccination that's coming out. Are we advised now to wait to be boosted?
For that new one, till it comes out. The boosters that are out right now are not that new booster. That one is supposed to be approved probably within the next week and then out by the end of September. The CDC says you can get the flu and COVID vaccine and the RSV vaccine all at the same time. Some of us might not want to because they make you feel kind of yucky. There is a new study that I heard about today, actually, that makes you wonder which arm you want to get it in. And according to this study, you might want to get the vaccines in the same arm every time. And the scientific theory is that then it goes in that arm and it targets the lymph nodes right around there. So those lymph nodes know and grow and learn how to fight that disease anytime it enters your body. It's going to be studied further. It's not a huge, big study that's come out yet, smaller. But after several months of getting the vaccine, as you found, your immunity wanes. You now have new immunity from being diseased.
Right.
So it's just, as we're all back out in society and back to school and maybe
unmasked.
not, and unmasking, you know, we saw last year, Dr. Lopez said, the first real big flu season in America since the beginning of the pandemic, because we were all more relaxed. So those same principles still apply. If you're sick, stay home, wash your hands a lot. If you are sick, maybe do wear that mask when you're out to protect others. All those measures make a difference, and especially those members of the population who are immunocompromised or have other comorbidities. They're the ones who really have always been at the most risk. They continue to be at the most risk.
Right. How prevalent are we seeing this new variant here in our area?
We are somewhat the epicenter. Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama are higher than everywhere else. I asked Dr. Lopez, could it be because we've been so darn hot that people are inside more than they are in other areas of the country? He said, that's possible. It's also possible. We tend to vaccinate less in this region than others. So they don't know why we're seeing it more, but it usually trends, you know, starts out in one area. And then when we talk about the flu, we usually worry about the flu in the fall and winter. Sometimes we look at what happens in the southern hemisphere's winter to know what might happen to our flu season. This year it's been in the southern hemisphere much more prevalent in children. So that flu shot is out now. And you can go get vaccinated for the flu.
All right, so try to avoid vaccine fatigue is what you're saying.
That's what the doctors are saying.
Okay, doke. All right, thanks a lot, Dawn. Okay, Missy, over to you. There was an incident that happened in the French Quarter this week that was a bit unusual.
Yes, it is not every day that you see a fatal sword fight.
No.
In the French Quarter, and even homicides are pretty uncommon there. This is the second one this year, but that's what happened in the 1300 block of Decatur Street on Monday morning, right outside the old U.S. Mint. Basically, an individual had been terrorizing that area, locals said, with his weapons cache, which included swords like a katana, a crossbow, and he was going around threatening people with these weapons, saying he had a license to kill. I don't know if it was mental health, if it was substance induced, but clearly this person was having some sort of a crisis, and he basically threatened the wrong individual. This individual, he stabbed that person in the arm, and that person fought back with his own knife and fatally stabbed him.
The sword wielder.
The sword wielder was fatally stabbed.
And we
in the
don't know
altercation.
we don't know this person's name. He's not been identified yet.
No, the coroner has not released his identity yet, and I was unable to procure it at the scene. Police did rule it self-defense on attack of, they ruled it self-defense.
Yeah.
And the man who was responsible for the fatal knife blow, he goes by Cuba, and from what I can hear, he's very beloved in the area. He was discharged from the hospital later that day. He's an older gentleman in his 70s and quite a pillar of the community from what I could hear.
And so the question is, if this person was walking around the quarter, had been for a while, wielding a sword and other weapons, why was he still out there doing this?
Yeah, and that's what residents were asking as well, because number of business people in the area had reported him to police, his behavior, and so why was there not a response? I don't really know the answer to that at this point.
Is there a law against carrying a sword in public? I mean, I know that sounds silly, but is there really, is there a law? Can you carry
Was he just
sword?
carrying, or was he threatening?
He was
folks with it,
actively
too?
threatening. He was saying he had a license to kill, and apparently it was quite a menace.
That would definitely give you some concern. All right, Missy, thank you so much. E, you wanted to talk about the retirement of someone who's really made a big change in the city of New Orleans.
A huge impact. Of all the public administrators, Ron Forman is arguably the best. I mean, I'm sure there have been many who've been very good, but he came in, you know, like in the 1960s, there was a real movement about the New Orleans Zoo that people said it was run down, it was really bad. There was the famous mangy polar bear who was green, you know. It was an old type zoo where the animals were locked in cages and you just go through the cages. I think the San Diego Zoo was the first to kind of open up this concept of an open air zoo. Anyway, there was a movement in the city, really from uptown citizens. Kitty Duncan, I remember, was a real leader in terms of like, let's redoing the zoo, and with the help of the support, Mayor Morial and then Mayor Landrieu, that they that they really tried to help support. But they brought in Ron Forman, who was like a junior administrator at City Hall dealing with public parks. And so he knew the practical background, but he went in and really became the leader. And he really just redid it, changed the whole structure, changed it to the Audubon Institute, expanded it to where we have the museums along the riverfront, and there's more coming. Just did a fabulous job. And you know, one thing I'm thinking about is they announced that there's going to be a national search, and I mean, you can't argue with national searches. This wasn't a national search. This is a local guy who was working in City Hall, okay, and who learned the job, and as a kid who used to play in Audubon Park, who knew Audubon Park all his life, and do that too. And so maybe there's alternatives sometimes to national searches as well. I mean, maybe you should at least consider the options. But it's he really just changed the zoo. I mean, the zoo is really regarded as one of the top in the country. I don't think anybody's going to ever surpass San Diego just because it's so big. But beyond that, I mean, it's really a great zoo.
And of course, now the aquarium and the insectarium in the same building that's newly renovated, and so many other things that have been added to the Audubon
Well, also
Institute.
the development of the riverfront that they've done. You know, I've always said, like, a lot of New Orleanians grew up in New Orleans and didn't know there was a river there because it was like warehouses and levees and all that. And the riverfront's been a great place for recreation, and they're expanding it more into the Marigny area. So he did a great job. He's going to, not leaving right away, he said he's going to hold out until I think, through 1924. I mean, through 2024. Okay. But really did a great job.
Yeah, he has done an amazing job, and we wish him a good retirement, but we're glad he's not leaving right away. Yeah. All righty, thanks a lot. Sticking with you, other stories.
Okay. Well, Baton Rouge is about to get a land-based casino. With what's the Hollywood Casino, which is one of the riverboat casinos, they changed the license. And now it's going to be called the Queen Baton Rouge. They changed the law, which allows more land-based casinos. It opens this month, and Shaquille O'Neal has a restaurant called the Big Chicken restaurant in there. So
okay, very good. Missy, over to you.
Stories that I'm working on next. Oh man, I just blinked. It's Friday afternoon. I want to know more about Cuba. That's what I'm working on, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Don.
Looking ahead, we were talking about the new insurance commissioner. I heard from an insurance expert today, if we make it through October without storms hitting us, there are at least 4 new insurers ready to start writing policies in this market again. So perhaps there is a light at the end of this insurance crisis tunnel, hopefully.
That would be good news all around. Will, real quick.
Voting Rights Act of 1965, Civil Rights Act 1964, preceded by the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom 60th anniversary this year on August 28th.
All right, very good. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES Television.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.